Hello everyone. Today is January 23rd. 3 days ago, on January 20th, the Canadian Prime Minister delivered a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos that sent shockwaves through the international community. The core message was simple, but explosive: the US-led global order is over. He did not explicitly name the United States, but the implication was unmistakable. Canada, he said, will no longer operate under the illusion that the so-called rules-based international order still functions as advertised. Instead, Canada will actively participate in shaping a new global order. The Prime Minister began by stating that we are now living in an era of great power competition, and that the old system, once supposedly governed by rules and norms, has effectively collapsed. This is not a radical or new idea. In fact, American political scientist John Mearsheimer argued as early as 2001 that the international system is fundamentally anarchic. Power, not rules, determines outcomes. What changed after World War II was not the nature of international politics, but the language used to describe it. The United States wrapped power politics in the vocabulary of rules, values, and institutions. Canada's Prime Minister simply said out loud what many governments have quietly known for years. In his speech, he referenced a famous metaphor from Czech thinker Václav Havel. Havel described a shopkeeper who displays a political slogan in his window, not because he believes it, but because everyone else does. The system survives not through belief, but through collective participation in a known fiction. According to the Prime Minister, the rules-based international order works in exactly the same way. When rules favor the United States, they are enforced. When they do not, they are ignored. Allies receive flexibility. Rivals receive punishment. Trade rules, international law, sanctions, all of them depend on who is involved. Canada and other middle powers understood this, but accepted the arrangement because it provided stability, market access, and security. That bargain, he argued, no longer exists. The Prime Minister emphasized that the world is not entering a temporary adjustment period, but experiencing a structural rupture. Over the past 2 decades, financial crises, pandemics, energy shocks, and geopolitical conflicts have exposed a critical truth: globalization itself has been weaponized. Tariffs are now tools of coercion. Financial systems are instruments of pressure. Supply chains are strategic vulnerabilities. When economic integration becomes a source of dependency rather than mutual benefit, pretending otherwise becomes dangerous. For countries like Canada, this creates a stark reality: multilateral institutions are weakening, and bilateral dependence on a single superpower is no longer sustainable. Canada's response is what the Prime Minister called values-based realism. This means abandoning fantasies about how the world should work, and instead preparing for how it actually works. Canada is now pursuing 3 core strategies. First, strengthening domestic power. Tax reductions, removal of internal trade barriers, large-scale investment in energy, AI, and critical minerals, and a commitment to double defense spending by 2030. Second, rapid diversification of partnerships. Canada is deepening ties with the European Union, expanding security cooperation, and signing new strategic and trade agreements across Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. Third, rejecting one-sided dependence. The Prime Minister made it clear: for middle powers, negotiating only with hegemonic states guarantees weakness, not sovereignty. Shortly before Davos, the Canadian Prime Minister visited China and announced a new strategic partnership. His words were carefully chosen: our partnership with China positions Canada favorably in the emerging global order. This was not symbolic diplomacy. It involved concrete trade terms, investment frameworks, and clearly defined areas of cooperation. That is precisely why the Davos speech mattered. It was not rhetoric first and action later, it was action first, followed by a declaration. This was not just another Davos address. It marked three historic shifts. 1. A core U.S. ally publicly acknowledged the collapse of the old order. 2. A middle power openly repositioned itself for a post-American-centric system. 3. Cooperation with China was framed not as defiance, but as strategic necessity. This was not emotional or ideological. It was calculated, pragmatic, and deeply strategic. As the Prime Minister concluded, nostalgia is not a strategy. In a world dominated by great powers, middle powers lose the most, unless they cooperate. The world is entering an era where rules are no longer guaranteed by default. Canada has chosen to stop pretending otherwise. By removing the slogans, confronting reality, and diversifying its alliances, Canada may well be among the first Western nations to openly step into the post-Old Order world. And that decision could reshape global politics far more than most people currently realize. Thank you for watching.